Hi, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I love colorful and sparkly makeup, but I don't love capitalism, and I'm often uncomfortable with the way that my love of makeup interacts with capitalism. So that's sort of the elevator pitch for my channel if you're new here, but in today's video I'm also going to be talking about my plans for no-buy and sort of consumption rehab this coming year, as well as my progress since doing my 6-month no-buy last year and sort of where I'm at right now. And I also want to open it up into a slightly larger conversation about, mental health and creativity and some things that I think have been influencing where I'm at when it comes to all of this stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, then please go ahead and like this video and subscribe. And yeah, I'm gonna do this get ready with me style, and in an effort to not get too distracted, I'm gonna keep the look very simple. I'm probably gonna be doing just like a one shadow look. This is the Jungle Lights palette from Flower Beauty. I won't be talking a lot about the makeup as I'm going through, but everything will be listed below in the description. So without further ado, I'm gonna get started. One thing I don't like about a get ready with me, I'm not a very sophisticated video editor, but I am always aware when I'm doing a get ready with me that I can't jump around in the editing, cut something and put it somewhere else, because it's gonna be very obvious with what is already on my face. So I'm gonna try and stay organized in this monologue here, but one of the things I'm gonna talk about is I got diagnosed with ADHD back in 2023. And I just realized I forgot one of my brushes. And one of the things that comes with that is that I am an absolutely awful storyteller. I digress, I get distracted, I forget where I was. I actually am, in my other non-makeup life, I am a writer, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in just a minute. But so I love writing, I love, I guess, theoretically telling stories. But when it comes to extemporaneous speaking, I find that really difficult. And it's always a challenge to do it while you're also putting on makeup. I don't know how so many people are so good at that. But to just start off with the basics, I am going to be going back on, I am on a no-buy now. So I started at the end of December and I'm going until the end of March. And the timing is just a little bit, offset, I guess. I started the last week of December. I can't remember, I think the 29th, and I think I'm planning to go till the 29th of March because I may be moving at the end of March. I feel like this keeps coming up in my no-buy videos, and it might sound like I keep using this as an excuse because it didn't happen last time. But I have been in limbo on this question for a good while now, and yeah, there's a possibility that I will be moving internationally, and so I would ideally be able to use up all my Sephora points, anything that doesn't transfer between countries, use up all my Pharmaprix points, which definitely won't transfer. So I wanted to save myself a couple of days at the end of March if there are things that I want to use up. But so far this no-buy has been a lot easier than my last one. And I have done 2 other videos before on my previous no-buy and my relationship to no-buys. I'll make sure to link those, but basically, I do no-buys because I find them so much easier than low-buys or just generally trying to consume in moderation like a normal person. For me, the automatic no is just a huge relief. When I am on a low-buy, I find myself just obsessing over how to spend my budget or how to use my limited transactions, or I just find myself obsessing, watching tons of reviews, obsessively thinking about a thing I want to the point that it's so much more difficult to say no than if I just weren't thinking about it that day. So for those reasons, I much prefer being on a no-buy. That's just based on the person. Some people find it really challenging to be sort of in that all or nothing kind of structure. For me, I really need that. I find it very difficult to impose structure on myself. So the more simple I can make that structure, the more rules-based I can make it, the more black and white, I guess, the easier it will be for me to actually keep those promises I made to myself. And the other thing that's different this time around is I have a really extensive collection at this point. At least for me, like, I have a lot of the things that I was really craving last time I was doing a no-buy. I bought a lot of my wish list. I overconsumed. Like, I will admit I overconsumed after my no-buy ended in August. I did go on a complete no-buy for October, which was fine and again felt like a relief. But then I wanted to participate in like the Black Friday sales and continue to buy things during December. Yeah, again, it's hard for me to moderate myself. That's gonna be like a future journey, I think, something I would like to get better with in the future. But for now, like, I'm okay accepting myself that way and being like, okay, well, how can I accept these truths about myself and still make this work the way I want it to? For me, that means going on a no-buy. And yeah, and it's been working out well so far since the end of December. There's actually not a ton that I want or I'm thinking about, and I think that that's partly because I do have so much new makeup in my collection. There's also a lot of things that I purchased like 6 months ago that I just haven't like fully tested, or like that still feel very novel to me. So I had the same experience last time I did a no-buy because I had just sort of come off of a period of overconsumption and I had a lot of newness in my collection, so I didn't find it that challenging at the beginning. And I remember that got quite a bit more difficult over time. I think that the novelty this time around will probably last longer because I mean, I know this isn't always correlated because novelty is like its own thing separate from quality, but I do think that I have a much higher quality collection, something that is more satisfying to a makeup lover than what I was sort of trying to make work back last year during my no-buy. In case I didn't specify, last time I did a 6-month no-buy and then separately a no-buy October. This time I'm doing a 3-month no-buy. And the reason I'm not going on a 6-month no-buy again is because, I don't know, because when I was getting toward the end of my last no-buy, last July, when I was sort of like in that final stretch, it was difficult, and to think about doing another 6 months was just too daunting. Now I know that this sounds silly, like I know that not buying makeup is like not a hardship whatsoever, but anyway, we're accepting this on the terms of like anti-consumerist YouTube. It was a challenge, and so for me it's like if I take a break for even a week and like make a few makeup purchases, really the costs of that, the drawbacks of that are, you know, acceptable. Like if that is what it takes for me to make it through 3 months of a no-buy and then after that another 3 months, that's fine. I'll like, you know, I'll place a few orders, I'll accept that cost. I can live with myself, you know, ethically and in terms of my self-respect. I can live with that. That's totally fine. So I wanted to, again, just kind of set myself up for success, and that's why I only decided to do 3 months this time around. When it comes to like how I'm doing since my last update, like I said, I have overconsumed. Excuse me. My cat really wants to come up on this table. I've sort of blocked her out. Like, I bought enough makeup that I'm embarrassed about how much makeup I bought. I'm not going to be doing an exhaustive, like, accounting of that here in public. But it's all things I like. I don't think I made a lot of purchases that weren't pretty well thought out, and I think that that is one of the real benefits for me of being on a no-buy, because I do keep a wish list, and I keep a very extensive wish list. Again, kind of an embarrassing wish list, and then I have a lot of time to think about it because, you know, when I put things on the wish list, I'm not stressed about it. Like, I'm not stressed about being like, is this really a smart purchase? Do I really need this? Like, no, there's no drawback to putting it on the wish list. It's, you know, it's chill. By the time my no-buy is up, I know I will have had a lot of time to think about it. So yes, I bought a lot of things. Yes, I did sort of allow myself to purchase a good amount of my wish list. But the purchases I made were things that I had wanted for a long time, and so therefore they were like more likely to be pretty well thought out purchases that had already had time to sort of like fizzle out if the desire was going to fizzle out. And the other part of that is that I think I have started to sort of make purchases in a different way. Before my first no buy, I would oftentimes be making impulse purchases that were also like 3-hour journeys, I guess. So I would hear about something new, or just see it on like, you know, a brand website on like Ulta or ColourPop. I would sort of like be overcome with desire for this thing, and then I would go on a deep dive of the entire internet trying to find swatches, trying to find out everything I could about this product, and it's sort of like, I don't know, it would just build on itself. It would be this whole ordeal. I would be like, it was off in the middle of the night. Like, it was just not healthy whatsoever. It took up a lot of my time that I can't get back. And then at the end of it, like, I would make this purchase. It was something that I had only wanted for a few hours. Like, it was essentially an impulse purchase. And yet it was like taking all this time out of my life, all this energy, all this like mental energy. And these were for things that like weren't that expensive. Like, thank goodness that I didn't like go into debt for makeup or anything like that. But I mean, like, over like an $8 blush to like, it just was not proportional at all. So that's the kind of impulse shopping that I was doing before my no buy. While the financial cost of that wasn't ultimately like devastating, I think that the energy cost and the mental cost of it has been huge for me. So that's something that I'm going to talk about. But just to wrap up this thought, I do think that having a wish list has helped me stay away from those kinds of impulse purchases, because I can take my time. Like, I can watch reviews as entertainment on items that I think I want to buy after my no buy, and I'm still like spending that time, so you could argue that there's not a huge difference, but it's more measured, it's less obsessive, it's less frenzied, and it's not stressful. Like, I have all this time to think about whether I want to buy it. And I know that whether I'm going to buy it or not buy it, it's not a huge decision. Like, it's not a life-changing decision. It shouldn't be taking up a lot of mental load. And yet, if I weren't on a no buy, I know that it would. So I think it just helps me to like keep things balanced, I guess. Now, I think if you're somebody who's like in the makeup, the anti-consumerist makeup space, somebody who's watching my videos either for entertainment or because you also have problems with makeup consumption, I think probably a lot of people understand this kind of behavior, these kinds of thought patterns. If you're just like a normal civilian, I know that this sounds crazy. I am aware of that. And so that's, I think, as good a transition as any to get into this sort of mental health piece. And I guess I use this word kind of broadly because I was diagnosed with ADHD. ADHD is technically not a mental health concern. It's a form of neurodivergency. But my undiagnosed, untreated ADHD had led to like a lot of mental health problems for me. I was feeling depressed. I was feeling very isolated. I was feeling very like I had no purpose because I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't get things done for my job, for my sort of creative pursuits. All I could think about really was makeup. Makeup was sort of an obsession. It was like a hyper focus kind of thing. And I'm talking about sort of the last like 2 years, like 2022 and 2023 for sure. And there's a lot of confounding variables. Like during this time, I moved to a city where I didn't know anybody. I was long distance with my partner. I was working remotely. The pandemic had happened and like a lot of things changed. A lot of people were working remote jobs that they wouldn't have otherwise been in. Don't get me wrong, I'm extremely, extremely grateful for my job and the fact that I can work from home. It allows me a lot of flexibility for my like other creative work. It's hard to imagine like going back to an office and stuff, but I think this also contributed to the sort of like sense that things were spiraling beyond my control, I guess, because I had just so little structure in my life, and that for me as a person is something that is sort of like a perfect storm. As I mentioned before, I am a writer, I think that people don't like to describe themselves as writers, and it is a little bit, I have the sense anyway that people don't like hearing other people describe themselves as writers, so I say that with a little bit of, I don't know, self-consciousness. But I do writing for my day job, but my main sort of career ambitions are around my creative writing, particularly in fiction, and I am working on a novel right now outside of my job. That's sort of like the career I think about as being my career, is hopefully my career as a writer. And writing a novel is like a huge project. It's not, it goes far beyond the simple interest in writing, ability to write. Like, it's an administrative project. It's a project of like endurance and discipline. And writing involves a lot of writing when you don't want to write. And that's particularly true for when you're working on a long project. It's also particularly true if you actually want to take the leap to get people to look at it, to try and get it published. It's a years-long process. And revision, I've been working on revision now for like 3 years. Revision is always something I've hated, so I think that being in such a prolonged state of like revision, being in this state of mind for so long, and really having to force myself to do it, I think has really, really sapped my creative energy in the past few years and completely changed my relationship to writing. Like, I think revising is an inevitable part of writing, so I'm not saying that this is a problem, it's just the context, I think, for how I've been feeling over the last few years. So I think like in this context where I was really lacking energy in my creative work, which is what gives me like purpose and drive in my life, and I was lacking all structure in my day-to-day life. I could go weeks without seeing another person if I wanted to. I could be completely nocturnal if I wanted to, especially like during the very long winter in the place where I live. So I think that during this time, makeup became like a coping mechanism and a crutch, as well as a creative outlet. So it's a double-edged sword, because I think that the creative outlet that makeup has given me during a time when I was not feeling inspired in my life has been hugely important, has been so good, and it's really kept me going. But I also think that makeup can be a creative distraction, and the creative like spirit behind makeup and all the sort of more like aesthetic intentions that we might have when it comes to beauty and makeup, they can very easily be co-opted and redirected towards like buying things. Especially, you know, for people who are struggling with their mental health, or for people who have ADHD, which comes with dopamine cravings, comes with like impulsivity and sometimes difficulty with like spending. It's very easy to use purchasing makeup as a crutch to give yourself that dopamine, to make yourself feel good and like inspired for a very short amount of time. I remember that Hannah Louise Poston said in an older video that buying a piece of beautiful makeup is easier than making art. And I found that so chilling and devastating. It really cuts down to the heart of a lot of this for a lot of us, I think, that we have these aesthetic desires, we have this like creative energy, and yet creating things, like creating art, is difficult. It's difficult within a system where you have to pay yourself some other way. It's difficult just as a baseline. It's not easy. It requires a lot of work and discipline. And buying makeup can sort of, it's like sugar water, you know, like it satisfies us in this sort of superficial way, so that we might not even notice that we're lacking something creatively, that we're lacking something that gives us truer fulfillment. And we can surround ourselves with beautiful things. We can put on beautiful makeup, and yes, makeup is an art. I never want to detract from that. Makeup artistry is absolutely an art, but sometimes we are creating art on our eyes, and sometimes we are just using something because it's beautiful. Like, we're just like putting on a beautiful foundation. Like, there isn't necessarily artistry in every aspect of makeup application, but because sometimes we're surrounding ourselves with beautiful products, we're using beautiful products, we're feeling them on our skin, we're touching them with our hands, I think sometimes that can sort of fulfill the same creative desires we might have, but it's not ultimately going to be enough. It's just enough in that moment. And in any given moment, like, it's easier to engage with those things than it is to actually do the work of creating art. And I think this is true even when it comes to makeup artistry. Like, people say this all the time, like, buying an eyeshadow palette is easier than using an eyeshadow palette. Like, you can buy an eyeshadow palette when you're lying in bed. Even the act of, like, getting up and putting on makeup requires energy that it doesn't take to buy things, you know? So I think, like, on any level, and to whatever level that you actually see your makeup application as art, I think it still applies that buying is just easier than creating. Obviously, like, having the money to buy things requires work that is difficult, but that's not always what we're thinking about at the time when we make a purchase. So all this to say that I think makeup was a really helpful creative outlet for me, but I also think it was a crutch, both for my, like, dopamine cravings that I was having as somebody who is not being treated for ADHD, and also as, like, a writer who was not finding satisfaction in creative work. And I should say that, like, Hannah Louise Poston got her book published. It's coming out, I think, this year, and that's incredible. That is not an easy journey, especially in poetry, and she got rejected many, many times, as everybody does, and I have to give all props to her for, like, continuing on that journey while also struggling with all of the complicated feelings that she was having about makeup at that time. So I've been thinking about all this a lot when it comes to, like, the new year and New Year's resolutions, and seeing other people on this platform too who I think have struggled with some of these same feelings, talking about how they want to get back into their creative hobbies that aren't makeup, you know, that they want to focus a little bit more on other things. And I think, separately but relatedly, a lot of the people I follow here on Instagram, a lot of the people that I just come across in the makeup space, I don't think my relationship to these things is, like, that unusual. I see a lot of people, like, with ADHD, not to make that what it's all about, but I see a lot of people who either have ADHD or think they have undiagnosed ADHD and are trying to get a diagnosis. I also see a lot of creative people, a lot of people who have done art either professionally or as a hobby, and have sort of, in many cases, fallen out of it a little bit in favor of makeup. And I don't think these things are unrelated. Like, the need for, like, artistic and aesthetic fulfillment, the need for dopamine, the inability to regulate your focus and attention, because that's ultimately what ADHD is. If you don't know, it's not always just being distractible, but it includes things like hyperfocus and obsession. Makeup is great and inspiring, totally acceptable as a hobby, but it's, a lot of us here are, like, a little bit obsessive. Like, it's sometimes borderline about, like, whether this is healthy or not, and I think that's why some, like, people have spending problems with makeup, or more focused on the spending piece or the environmental waste, etc. But, like, we could just as easily look at this through the lens of attention, and, like, a lot of people talk about the attention economy with, like, social media. Of course, social media plays a huge role in the makeup world. To have your attention, like, focused on social media is one thing. To have your attention focused on buying and wanting things, it's another thing. And of course, in the makeup community, those things are very, very linked, because a lot of the social media that you might be using to distract yourself or relax is trying to sell you things. But like, not only are we losing our money in many cases to makeup brands, we're losing our attention. We're losing our mental energy as well in these transactions. And like that can be a big deal when you have other goals, when there are like other beautiful things to think about, other aesthetic things to think about. Like I have barely been reading. I did all my studies in English. I read huge piles of texts regularly throughout many years of my life, and yet I finished like 3 or 4 books all of 2023. I had friends publish books that I haven't read. This is an attention problem, this is an ADHD problem, but I think it's also like my focus just is elsewhere. Like I would almost always rather be thinking about makeup than about something else. And that is something that I want to cool down a little bit in 2024. Even though I'm also like here on the internet now, I have a YouTube channel and I love doing the stuff that I do for this channel. Like I don't want to stop, I just want to like have more balance, I guess. Reading is one of the things that I really hope to spend more time on this year. And I think like I was a little bit inspired by Lara Likes Mascara, who does at the end of her makeup videos, she'll do like a what I'm reading currently, and I think she had a goal for reading like I want to say 70 books or something in 2023, so we are not the same, but I think I want to make a goal of literally just finishing 1 book every 2 months for 2024, and maybe using this as a space to hold myself accountable to that in addition to my makeup goals and my no-buy goals. Because I think it is, for all the reasons I've been talking about, I think it is related to my makeup consumption journey to be able to like refocus some of my attention on reading. It involves adjusting my relationship a little bit to makeup as well. So stay tuned, but I think I plan to update you on that and really try and hold myself to that goal, even though I know it's like a minuscule goal. So I'm not trying to like diagnose anybody over the internet. I'm not trying to impose my experience on anybody. And certainly if you like don't have a problem with these kinds of things, that's great. I'm not trying to tell you that you have a problem just because you're here or just because you engage with makeup or makeup content. I just see a lot of other people, other creators who are struggling with some of these things as well. And I appreciate like hearing about their process. So if this could be a place for me to share that, I don't know, I think that's probably helpful for myself and maybe it's helpful for somebody else as well. To transition to talking a little bit more specifically about what I'm trying to do during this 3-month no-buy, I do think that one of my most important lessons from my experience with this stuff so far is that it's very important for me to set myself up for success. And that means taking on goals that are not too daunting, that are certainly not unachievable. Like I said, that's why I'm doing 3 months this time. I also talked in certain other videos about having like a pressure release valve. I think that's more important when you're dealing with a longer term no-buy, and for me 6 months actually did feel quite long. So for me last time, that meant allowing myself to buy like a fancy, exciting new eye primer when my old boring one ran out. And by the way, I love this eye primer, the Rare Beauty one. It's currently my holy grail now. I have repurchased this, even though it's a little bit expensive for the amount of product you get. But anyway, this time around, I'm not so worried about that. Maybe I'm sort of just forgetting that it got harder over time last time, and it might do the same this year. But I'm really not feeling that much pressure, and I'm not that worried that I will want to break my no-buy. The one exception I would allow myself, and I think like when it comes to a pressure release valve, you could choose to make an exception for a particular like single purchase that like if something comes out, you know, you would buy it. For me, that would be if Alter Ego does a dupe of the I Need a Nude palette, I think I would buy it. I think I would buy it at launch because I know their palettes kind of come in and out of stock randomly, and it's not a big expense, and it's something I would really like to try. That would be like a premeditated thing that would have been on my wish list already, and so I wouldn't feel like mentally it would allow me to backslide. But really that's the only exception I would allow myself. Otherwise it would have to be a replacement. If anything else comes out that's new or limited edition, like this is kind of a silly one, but e.l.f. just put their like Jelly Pop primer back on their website, and I had been eyeing that, and I was buying skincare on the e.l.f. website recently, and I was like, oh, should I just get it and call it an exception? And that, no, I'm not okay with that. That was not like a pre-existing exception, and the fact is, like, it is still important to me to like miss out on certain things. I think that is still part of the process for me, and if it's still in stock after my no-buy, I don't even know if I would buy it, but certainly I'm not going to break my no-buy for the argument like, oh, I might miss out, because that's what happens. Like when you're on a no-buy, you miss out. That's part of the point, and I think that's okay. I think it's like, it's okay to miss out, and it's important to allow your brain to like realize and understand that it's okay to miss out. Like you missed out and you're fine. Therefore, it's fine next time you might miss out. The other thing is that I have a lot of mascara backups for some reason. I just bought a lot of mascara over the last few weeks, so I don't expect really to actually run out of anything. Skincare is not included in my no-buy, and I will say, like, before I went on my no-buy, I did a little bit of panic shopping, and one of the things that I bought was a set of like cream nail polish. I realized when I did it, like, I had been wanting to get like a black nail polish. I really don't like liquid nail polish. I'm not good at it, and it always chips, and so I was like, I'd like to like just figure out how to do a manicure on myself so that it will last, so that I can get the lines straight. Seemed like cream gel polish would be an interesting one. It does require, like, you have to have like a UV lamp, so it requires a lot of like accoutrements that I wasn't willing to get previously, but I did finally like bite the bullet on them, and I realize that it's kind of dangerous territory. I really don't want to allow myself to like overconsume on other things while I'm on a makeup no-buy. That really is not the point. So I'm like keeping an eye on that. I don't certainly expect to need more nail polish because I bought like a whole set that basically has any color that I wanted, and I don't even know if I like doing manicures. Again, that's one of those things where it was easy to buy it, and now it's less easy to get around to spending the time to give myself a whole manicure and do it right and, you know, make it last and la la la. So we'll see where that goes, but I don't expect it to be buying nail polish or like perfume or anything like that on my no-buy, even though it's not like technically something I'm tracking or including. One thing I do want to get better about in the future, as I work towards, you know, maybe potentially honing like moderation as a skill for myself, I do want to get better about like the overcompensation before and after no-buy, where hold on, let me do this off camera. It's very tempting to panic buy before a no-buy and then to overconsume after a no-buy, and I'm definitely guilty of both of those things. Again, it's like it's not first on my list of things that I want to try and improve, so it's okay. Like, I allowed myself that for me, that's the cost of doing no-buys for this past year. But theoretically, a lot of people would ask, what's the point of a no-buy if you just buy all the same makeup right after in like the span of a few days? Arguably that's worse, because then you like don't actually enjoy the makeup in the way that you would if you were like buying it periodically throughout the year. That's something that I'll think about in the future. Okay, I tried to finish everything up off camera. I don't really like how this look came out, but it wasn't really the point. I also really don't like this mascara that I just saw Kelly Gooch raving about, the e.l.f. Lash Extender. I don't know, I was hoping it would save this eye look, but I don't think it did. Anyway, there's one other thing that I wanted to address, which is sort of the public nature of sharing this kind of thing online. And I think a lot about incentives, and Cloverum Cam just did a video where they talked about this. I don't remember exactly what video it was of their like Clovemas videos, but I will definitely find it and link it. And they talked a lot about incentives from both like a public policy perspective, which I think is so cool, and also like looking at the beauty industry and the incentives that influencers have. Those are really, really interesting takes. I often also like think about incentives when it comes to myself, and doing a no-buy online and committing to things, making promises to yourself publicly, that gives you the incentive to follow through because you don't want to publicly fail. And as I've been talking about, I personally find it difficult to impose structure on myself, to impose deadlines on myself, to keep promises to myself. And when I do those things publicly with sort of accountability buddies, then I find it easier to follow through. That's a good incentive for me. Like, to do this online creates a good incentive for me to achieve the thing that I actually wanted to achieve. And I have sometimes on this platform been tempted to like scale back my goals because I don't want to publicly fail at them, whether that's like going back on a no-buy or, you know, having my collection be cruelty-free. There's also a boycott I'm participating in, which I have a video either coming or already on my channel about that. And also just like talking about anti-consumerism, anti-capitalism, because when I talk about these things, it's always at the back of my head that I don't want to be a hypocrite, and like am I committing myself to things that I'm not prepared to follow through on? And I think that these thoughts like create bad incentives, because I want to use this public platform as a way to keep myself accountable. I don't want it to deter me from having goals or having values. This applies in a lot of areas because I guess having opinions publicly always sets you up to be called a hypocrite if you don't live exactly the way your like principles would suggest. I don't think that you should ever be judging other people based on your principles. You shouldn't be preaching to people. I get that. But it's okay to have opinions and be imperfect. It's okay to have goals and be imperfect. I think most of us know this, and most of us aren't judging other people, but when it comes to ourselves, we maybe are, or we're worried that other people will hold us to a higher standard just because we had a goal. And this is a bad incentive. So I have been feeling these things sometimes about when I think about what I want to say on my channel or what I want to commit to on my channel. I don't want to allow that fear to hold me back from like improving things about my life or my collection. I don't want to allow those like good incentives to become bad incentives. That's all. I think that finally concludes all my thoughts on this subject. Just to give you like more brass tacks, I have only really planned through the end of March, through the end of this no-buy. I really don't know what's going to come after. I expect to spend a lot of this year on a no-buy, but have sort of like periods in between those where I'm not restricting myself. But that is certainly subject to change because it sort of depends on how the first no-buy goes, how the first period of unrestricted consumption goes, whether I feel like that is going to be a good strategy for me. Realistically, I don't think I'm ready to have a plan for the whole year. I'll make sure to update this after my no-buy ends in, April or so. Yeah, until then, I'll be playing around with my makeup here. I'll be doing a lot of using what you have kind of content. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I hope to see you very soon. Bye!